11 days ago, Iran hit something in Kuwait that oil money can't quickly replace, American missiles can't manufacture, and a Gulf city can't function without. A Patriot battery can intercept a missile. It cannot manufacture drinking water. The weakness was never the border, it was the plumbing. Washington sent Kuwait an invoice for protection. 4 days later, smoke was rising from the machinery that makes its drinking water. The plant is the message. The palace is the target. 11 days ago, Iran hit something in Kuwait that oil money can't quickly replace, American missiles can't manufacture, and a Gulf city can't function without. It wasn't an oil terminal. It wasn't a base. Almost nobody noticed. Everyone was watching Hormuz. Tankers, crisis, warships. That was the easy war to explain. Underneath it, something else burned for about a day, then dropped out of the news. Kuwait's government confirmed the fire. A large number of electricity generation units damaged. But there was a second word in that statement: drinking water. The plant that burned made both electricity and the water people drink. Roughly 90% of Kuwait's drinking water comes from machines that pull salt out of the sea. Not its industrial water, it's drinking water. There are no permanent rivers on the Arabian Peninsula, no lakes, no upstream, nothing behind the machine. Kuwait doesn't really have a water supply. It has an industrial process. Oil made the Gulf rich. Desalination made it possible. Burn an oil terminal and Kuwait gets poorer. Stop the machines and Kuwait stops being livable. One of those is an economic problem. The other one has a clock on it. And here is how the Gulf built the trap for itself. Most of these plants aren't separate buildings. They are bolted onto power stations. Burn fuel, make electricity, use the leftover heat to boil seawater. Efficient, cheap. Also a shared throat. One building makes the lights and the water, so nobody has to aim at your drinking water. They aim at your power plant. The water dies with it. Now read the Kuwaiti statement again. Generation units damaged. Same site. Same fire. Was the water the target or the electricity? That question may not have an answer. That's exactly the point. So build some of them, spread them out, hide them. Picture the drinking water system for the entire Gulf. Every city, every tower, tens of millions of people living in the desert. You'd expect thousands of critical plants. More than 90% of the Gulf's desalinated water comes from 56 major plants. 56. A CIA assessment from 2010 called each one extremely vulnerable to sabotage or military action. 16 years ago, nobody fixed it. Nobody bothered. And that number is the whole story. Concentration is what made this water cheap. Big plants, huge output, low cost per liter. It's also what makes the whole thing killable. A dispersed system absorbs a loss. A concentrated one doesn't. Efficiency and fragility turned out to be the same decision. And you can't hide them. A desalination plant drinks the sea, so it sits on the coast, in the open, at a permanent address. Most of them within about 350 kilometers of Iran. You can't move a coastline. The Gulf didn't defeat the desert. It built machinery that temporarily overrules it. And machinery has an address. So write a check. There are some of the richest governments on earth. Money doesn't move fast enough. If the major plants go down, some cities lose most of their drinking water within days. Days. And the protection they already bought? A Patriot battery can intercept a missile. It cannot manufacture drinking water. The Gulf bought protection from invasion. Nobody invaded. The weakness was never the border. It was the plumbing. And 4 days before the plant burned, something happened in Washington that changes what the fire means. July 13th, Oval Office. The president talking to reporters. His words: I want to be reimbursed because we're protecting a very rich portion of the world. Then he named them: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait. He had already floated being guardian of the Strait of Hormuz for a 20% cut. He added that America doesn't need them anyway. Washington sent Kuwait an invoice for protection. 4 days later, smoke was rising from the machinery that makes its drinking water. Sit at that desk. The bill on one side, the smoke out the window on the other. If you come here for the part of the story everyone else misses, subscribe. This brings us to the question none of the coverage asked. What is Iran actually trying to accomplish? Because if the answer is thirsty Kuwaitis, the target's wrong. Systematically attacking a civilian water supply would buy Iran 50 years of Gulf hatred and hand Washington every argument it could want. That's a terrible trade for a country that needs the Gulf neutral. So look at the board. Both sides can threaten water infrastructure. Only one side depends on the desalination for almost its entire drinking supply. Iran has rivers, glaciers. Iran has dams. Iran has aquifers. Iran uses desalination, but Iran doesn't need it. Kuwait needs it for 90%. We cannot know what was said inside Iranian planning rooms. Nobody can. But the strategic logic appears to be simpler than cruelty. Once American operations run through Kuwaiti territory, Kuwait becomes part of Iran's target map. Not the only reason it's on that map, but a decisive one. The pressure may be designed to make one man ask one question. Are the Americans protecting us from this war? Or are they the reason it's landing on our water? That question doesn't need an answer to work. It only needs to get asked. Every time a plant burns, it gets asked louder. The plant is the message. The palace is the target. And that's where this stops being about Kuwait. Put yourself in that room and look for the exit. Remove the Americans, and you're alone with Iran. No guarantee, no air defense. Keep the Americans, and Iran adds you to the target map. Ask Washington to escalate, and more strikes come home. Ask Washington to stop, and you discover how little control you have over your own protection. 4 walls, no door, and every year that room gets smaller. The war teaches Iran which buildings matter. It teaches the Gulf how little the guarantee covers. Nobody in there is learning anything reassuring. That is not an alliance between equals. It is strategic captivity. The Gulf bought a system to keep the war away from home. The system may be what's bringing the war home. 50 years of arrangements built to stop an army at a border. The army never came. The drone did. Now the caveats, and they're fair. Attribution is contested. Kuwait blames Iran, and when a plant was hit back in March, Iran blamed Israel. Kuwait says its system stayed stable, and that's true. Nobody went thirsty. One damaged plant is not a national collapse, but water infrastructure has entered the escalation ladder. That rung didn't exist in February, and the vulnerability isn't theoretical anymore. 1991, Iraqi forces destroyed most of Kuwaiti's desalination capacity. After liberation, household water ran 4 days a week. The rest arrived by tanker ship and truck. Same country, same weakness. 35 years ago, they rebuilt bigger. They didn't rebuild tougher. No redundancies planned. 2 ways this reaches you. The first is economic. Oil raises freight. Freight raises food. Insurance amplifies everything because underwriters price a burning coastline long before governments admit anything changed. It lands in your grocery bill months later, and you never connect it to a fire in Kuwait. The second is bigger. If American protection turns host countries into targets, every government under an American guarantee begins recalculating. That's not a Middle East question. Every country that hosts American forces or sits under an American security promise just watched what happened to one that did everything Washington asked. Not just in the Gulf. Watch the concrete, not the speeches. 1. Gulf states building water reserves, backup intakes, redundant plants. That's money admitting what officials won't say out loud. 2. Any Gulf government limiting American military use of its territory. That means the message reached the palace. 3. Washington formally demanding payment. Because if protection has a price, it has a cancellation clause. The Gulf spent 50 years guarding the oil beneath the desert. But the real kill switch was never underground. It was connected to the tap.